Greetings family, I hope you're well. My name is Toinik Betu, and today I'll be exploring whether the forthcoming EU referendum is not really about immigration, but instead a question about racist violence and sovereignty. A few weeks ago, London had its mini Obama election moment. Whatever you think of his politics, in electing Labour's Sadiq Khan as Mayor of London over, Golden Boy Zach, the electorate said that some immigrants, despite having unprivileged backgrounds, are actually okay. However, before I can really talk about the matter at hand, that is, the EU referendum, I have to mention the resurgence of that old bugbear, English hooliganism, in Europe. Now, many British politicians and media bodies are trying to play this down. Some are even seeking to portray the recent clashes in France where bare-chested Britons and Russian fans fought in the streets. Now, they're trying to pretend this is self-defense, but in reality, this was just hooliganism. If we have to be really truthful, racist violence is as British as Yorkshire pie. That is, irrespective of whether the violence manifests itself physically or spiritually. So, let me give you an example. It only took a couple of days after our beloved Muhammad Ali made the transition to ancestors before the racists of Devon decided, in their almighty wisdom, to erect a life-size golly of our African freedom fighting legend in a sick parody of his boxing career. Thankfully, they didn't hang it from a tree, but I think you get the point, and no doubt some of them really wanted to. But British extremism sank to new depths when on Thursday the 16th of June, Nigel Farage, actually a slip of the tongue, of the toxic UKIP party published the latest propaganda in his campaign to encourage the British public to vote Brexit in the EU referendum. Utilising imagery from the Nazi Germany, he unveiled a poster displaying Syrian immigrants and refugees as being on their way to Britain. The caption, "Breaking Point." Now, if you really think about what that was, it was pampering to the worst base levels of humans. It was a disgusting and unsurprising stunt from one of the UK's leading independent white supremacist politicians. A few hours later, those two words, breaking point, acting like a trigger to Mancunian candidates everywhere, had Farage's desired effect when the hate spilled onto the streets of the UK. And in West Yorkshire, a terrorist named Thomas Mair, shouting "Britain first," shot and stabbed the Labour MP Jo Cox to death. It was a serious tragedy. Her only crime was being a humanitarian. Breaking point. A British search of Mair's home found samples of Nazi regalia, bomb-making and white supremacist literature in it. Bizarrely, or perhaps not, media reports did not refer to him as a terrorist, despite the fact that when Mair was asked his name in court, he responded, "Death to traitors, freedom for Britain." But if Omar Mateen, the mass murderer in Florida, he's the one responsible for last week's LGBT massacre, well, if he's been referred to as an extreme Islamic jihadist, then surely Mair is a suspected supporter of Paul Golding's so-called loyalist group, that is Britain First. Isn't he a racist Christian crusader? Tragically, on the same day when Jo Cox was killed, Boko Haram militants rampaged through Kuda in Adamawa state in Nigeria, burning down homes and killing at least 18 women. They also set houses on fire randomly. Now you've got to check this. The news coverage on this? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. 18 women. Wall-to-wall footage on Jo Cox, and nothing wrong with that. But not even a mention of the women in Nigeria. Was it because they were African? I think we know the answer to that. It's like the zero coverage of the floods in Accra, Ghana. They've claimed 10 innocent lives, but once again, media coverage, zilch. The message seems the same. Unless the victim is blue-eyed, or it's a slow news day, the British media just doesn't want to know. Think about that. Anyway, let me get back to the main story. A lot of background noise going on, so please excuse me. So, onto the referendum. Most of the leaders of the Leave campaign have a colonial mentality, and they loathe the fact that within the EU, some of their power is being curtailed. For them, this is not really about immigrants, it's about sovereignty, and you've got to check that. When Theresa May launched a consultation into Stop and Search in 2014, do you really think she gave a damn about us? Because no, she didn't. The reason why she did that is because the British government were forced to change their policing tactics because of the UK's repeated violations of our human rights. The EU and its conventions on human rights protected all of us. This is something they don't really like to talk about. And it's not the only time this has occurred. The EU has meant that British politicians have had to really stand down on many issues. That's like their attempts to curtail our right to protest, our rights as workers, and even our rights to challenge deaths in custody. Again, we're not hearing about that in this debate. It's all about immigrants. The political class, they actually hate this, and they see the referendum as an opportunity to regain their power to do whatever it is that they want, whenever it is that they want, without any checks or balances. Please, don't forget, no matter what side of the debate Cameron pretends he's on, it was him in 2014 that vowed to scrap human rights. Now, this was part of African History Month. He did it on the 1st of October. That was his pledge, a manifesto pledge. And he's going to scrap human rights in the UK, 2014. So ignore what he's saying now. But for the supporters of Britain First and parties like UKIP, well, they just have a racist little island mentality. They crave the days when so-called Britain or England ruled the world, and they seek past glories. But news check to you all. The UK is in the EU, and no wishing it away will ever change that fact. Look at the map. We're here. Cross-border collaboration is the only way to solve and to share solutions to problems like poverty, climate damage, and economic enslavement. Immigrants are not the problem, you racist clowns. We're the cure. Lazy bums like you who target us, you're the problem. Across the Atlantic in the US of A, a nation that was stolen and then founded on the blood and sweat of migrants, including the forced labour of enslaved Africans and the violence committed against the Amerindians by those cowboy terrorists. The surreal possibility of Donald Trump becoming US president actually exists. This is a real thing. It's not even a parody or a joke. Their election is a virtual referendum on the State of the Union and how racist the Obama-era's so-called post-racial America truly remains in society. Likewise, in 48 hours, the British public will vote on whether it will, and let's think about this, collaborate with other nations within the EU, or try to return to its racist past where Britain led in slavery, colonialism, and kind of barbaric white supremacist-driven violence in the name of, what was it? Self-serving capitalism, civilization, and Christianity. The 3 C's, as they call them. This is not a referendum on British independence, or even immigrants, nah. This is a referendum on Britain's willingness to let go of its deeply held white supremacist beliefs. Because it's those that are maintaining this violent warmongering that exploits everyone across the world in this interconnected world. So it's really a question on whether Britain is, well, willing to let go of its violent racism against the so-called foreigner. That's like me and the working class. That's whether they're African, Asian, Polish, or Turkish. Yeah, I'm biased, I'm a son of an immigrant, but these are just facts. Either way, no matter what happens, I do propose 2 actions happens after the vote. 1, I actually think the organisation called Britain First should be banned and made a prescribed terror group. That guy killed that woman, Britain First. Make them a terrorist group. And 2, the English hooligans caught causing trouble during the Euro 2016, and well, they should have their passports seized for at least, 10 years? And they should be banned from travelling abroad. It's the only way to keep the world safe. This country continues to export racism, English racism, so please, let me know your thoughts below, and may the ancestors guide and protect us. Ashe.